Two ordinary cops and you're back in Australia, Schultzy.
I am, mate. They let me back in Australia. Maybe they're happy to get me to leave. I will take I'd say a quick joke. Well, not really a joke. I was MC at the wedding, and mate, apparently I got a thumbs up on my Kiwi accent. I think Miriam was a bit perplexed about. Halfway through, I decided to change to my Kiwi accent, and I said because maybe they couldn't understand my Australian accent. But yeah, mate, they gave me a thumbs up at the wedding. They said it was A1, my Kiwi one. So,
There's been men shot for less, Schultzy.
but yeah, no, mate, it was a great 5 days. It was a bit too short, but and the weather over there was outstanding. And now I'm back in the heat, humid Brisbane.
Happy days, mate. Happy days. Yeah. What do you got today for us, mate?
Well, mate, so I actually ran into a heap of people. Big shout out to Mark. He has been, well, Miriam, my partner, one of her best friends for many years since school days, I think, or uni. So a big shout out to him. He's been listening to it over there. He's Hamilton in North Island, New Zealand, and yeah, so a big shout out to him. He actually did have a suggestion that we should talk about funny responses or reasons for why they did things or excuses. And it was funny because I was just talking to you and we can't, just trying to think of any off the top of our head. It's you might have to go. Oh, hold on. We'll talk about. We might have to go through our notebooks, mate. But that's a bit later on in the episode
Yeah.
to see to see reasons. But yeah, no, mate, we'll have a think about that one because I'm sure we've heard some crackers over the years. I just can't come up with any right now. Um, but I will another shout out actually to Chris. He's a cop, North Island. He works. He's actually in that New Zealand. Was it Metro Police? I think the show that
Not
that the
police
New
ten
Zealand.
seven.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yep.
he's in that one, and I'll tell you what, mate. He told me some stories and had me in fits of laughter. So big shout out to him, and yeah, I'll get him listening. So I was chatting to him about it, and he said he'd. I asked him if he'd like to come on, and he said he'll have to check with up the line to see if that'd be all right. But
Yeah,
mate,
just got to get the clearance. You can't. Yeah, that's fair enough. Just for those who don't completely understand that, we're, believe it or not, we're technically media. So every police force has a media policy unit, and it's important that everything's vetted to come out because we get involved in investigations, and some members might know exactly, the rules and regulations around that. So it's very strict around what gets released to social media. It's why a lot of police don't comment on anything. It's why that we do this podcast after we've left, and why I had to get basically deputy commissioner approval to speak to anybody still in the job. So the fact that he has to get approval to come on is completely normal. So that's not
yeah,
it's not a cover up. It's not hiding anything. It's just um, that you need to be able to control what information comes out of an organisation that holds responsibility for a lot of extremely confidential information. So um, that's the way that is. And what I also found funny was the deputy commissioner in the Northern Territory told me that, but it's okay. You guys pretty well comply with it anyway, even though you're civilians. You're pretty well in line. So yeah, but that's why that is what it is. You just can't have coppers just carrying on in the media because it's a professional organisation and we deal with the most intimate moments of people's lives, and it's important that that information is protected.
Yeah, yeah, mate, definitely. And I think the deputy commissioner's comments. I mean, we lived in that world, and anytime you talk to media or anytime, there's policy and procedure around what you can say, even to people outside the job, and so you practice it, day in day out. Especially the higher up you get to the like more into investigative roles and all that sort of stuff. You do become privy to some pretty sensitive information. That's for sure. Um,
Yeah, no, definitely.
Mate, another one. So my brother was actually talking to Chris, a cop in Toowoomba, and he listens to us. And so a shout out to him. Thanks for listening. So I didn't have many more details on that, but yeah, it's good to see we've got a fairly good range actually of people listening, which then makes me run into, mate. I'll run into. So we got an email, and this is from a Thomas. Now, Thomas, I will apologise because we can get emails on our thing, but our IT stew is still yet to go through because every time I try and reply to the email, it doesn't send for some reason. But he said he's just getting under it. He's just a bit busy at the moment. But I will get back to you. But a shout out to Tom. So he's 4 years, mate. He's been in the Vic poll, and he just happened to come across a podcast, and yeah, he really likes it. He had quite a I won't mention exactly what it was, but quite a horrific job, and he said it was a bit comforting to hear some of the stuff we had to say, when dealing with that sort of stuff. So um, it's I think and that's what you and I go back and forth about this all the time. It's all about supporting each other and listening to each other's stories and having a bit of a debrief, and just to know that you're not the only one that deals with this and you're all going through that. We all fight our own demons. Yours is an ugly little bastard, I think you said last time.
Mm.
But yeah, so I think that's pretty good. But he just said he appreciates very much.
Now, you
He's
mentioned beforehand it was to do with child death, so that yeah, they're pretty
yeah,
horrendous. Yeah, so he's obviously listened to our worst jobs, and the beauty of something like this is you get to hear someone else feel the same way you feel, and you normalize it. You mightn't necessarily talk about it in your crew, and you might be thinking things you don't want to say, but I mean, coming from us, we're pretty experienced. Between us, 25 years, and that's the way I would feel that to this day. In fact, I'd probably be no good at all these days, but um, you're not supposed to be enjoying a job like that. So that's just how they are. They're horrendous.
yeah, yeah, that's exactly right. And yeah, so big shout out to you, Tom. Thanks for getting in contact, mate. And yeah, it's really good to hear some people's feedback as well. We also got another email, mate. So the emails are starting to flow into the Two Ordinary Cops
Good, good.
email box,
Yep.
which is good. And mate, this one's from someone who's actually not in the police, but is grown up around police and was in a relationship with a police officer. And yeah, basically in about a week, they've listened to almost but 10 episodes. So over a week, I think this works out. They would have listened to about 40, no, probably 50 episodes or so. Um,
Bloody hell. Poor bugger needs counselling.
so yeah, so that's well, it's really good. It's good to hear you keeping entertained and all that sort of thing. And I said some across yeah. So the details and explanations kept me engaged. The humor brought me back time again and again. So I love the leadership one about leave your ego at the door. Value advice and applicable in so many contexts. So thanks for the feedback. That's that's really really good, and yeah, basically appreciates our perspectives and experiences. So yeah, it's yeah, that's pretty good, mate. I've also got one more shout out as well, and same to you, Joe. I will actually get back to you on email. Um, but yeah, once Stu figures this out. So Stu, if you're listening, if you can get onto that, that'd be good because I think he listens to every episode as well. um, but mate, the other one is Chris Luxton. I'll give him a shout out. He actually one of the owners of the butcher shop just down where I'm working at the moment. And I'll give a shout out to Pete Maniatis as well. One of my high school friends. Still friends today. But yeah, Chris actually, mate, I sent him the link. I texted to him this morning, and he got a chance to drive around later on today, and he's up to 4 episodes already. So
He's into
oh yeah,
it.
yeah. So it was. He actually texted me straight away, and yeah, so that's pretty good. He said, yeah, he said, great podcast. I really think the PG version is awesome, and the mental health chat is great. So thanks for that, Chris. Well, I see him almost daily, mate. So I'll oh yeah, I'll get a bit more info out of him then. But
No, beauty.
mate. Mate, today, do you want to open it up what we're going to talk about today? I think this is pretty, what you spoke to me earlier was pretty exciting and interesting to go back all those years.
Yeah, so we've moved into what was my in-laws' house. So we sort of moved in for a while, and we had all our stuff in boxes. My wife went through and she was opening a heap, and she found a little steel container, and she opened it up to see what was in it, and it was full of notebooks, as in police notebooks. And I've just pulled them out. I mean, we pulled them out and a couple of weeks ago. So it was funny because I said to my wife, "Oh, what should we talk about? What's something interesting?" She said, "Have you mentioned your notebooks that we found?" I went, "No, we haven't. I haven't even looked at them." And I opened one up, the first one. They're sort of obviously when I put them away, I've put them away in order. Not that I can remember that, but I've basically got every single notebook and diary that I had in the police force. I've still got them, and um, except for one or two that went through the wash, which is never good. When that, and it will always Mr. Murphy's law will pop in, and it will be that particular notebook will have the information that you require.
Yep.
But anyway, I opened the first notebook, and um, it happens to be the very first notebook I was ever given in the police force when we were recruits at the college. And it was funny as well, mate, because as we were talking about this before we started recording, I flipped it open to page 15. Now, the date written at the front, well, a bit of a running joke there, was to show how new I was to the police force. Schultzy and I joined the Squad 91 of 2007. We started on the 26th of February 2007. So obviously we were, you go through a lot of admin when you first start and like code of conduct and all this sort of stuff really early on. And then we obviously got given our notebooks about a week later because I've got written down here the date is the 1st of the 3rd, 2006. So I'm still in civilian mode and I still think it's 2006. Right, and it just got received notebook and instruction on use instructed by Sergeant Nash. That's Mark Nash on how to use a notebook. But anyway,
Yep.
I flipped over and I was just having a quick breeze through a few notes. And anyway, I got to page 14, and obviously we were practicing RBTs and taking notes and all this sort of stuff. I must admit, my writing was quite neat. Anyway, I'll get to, we're obviously role playing, and this is the date of the 20th of the 4th, so the 20th of April 2007. And it's got RSBT, which is roadside breath test. McMillan's Road, 1 kilometre from Vanland Drive. Vehicle, we've got an apprehension, traffic apprehension. My partner is T. Const Tracy, which is trainee constable Ellis Tracy, who we've spoken about.
Yep.
11:10 hours. It was a Queensland vehicle, Rego 758 India Delta Tango, expiry 5 of '07, being a Holden Rodeo utility dual cab. Driver, Ben Keith Schultz. Address, NTPFES College Base, Berrima Police Station, NT. Date of birth, your date of birth.
Yep.
Place of birth, Kingaroy. Occupation, fisherman. But the funniest part's over the next page. Positive roadside breath test. I said, this test indicates to me that you may be over the legal limit. You are now under arrest for the purpose of being conveyed to Berrima Police Station for a breath analysis. Do you understand what I've told you? Oh, shit, righto, he says. I said, what reason do you have for driving up while over the limit? He said, I had to get home. Of course you did. I said, have you consumed any alcoholic drinks? And on it goes. Yeah, I blew over, didn't I? Yeah, you're being a smartass. I said, when did you have your last drink? He goes, about 5 minutes ago. I finished it when you pulled me up. Good on you. I said, what would you like done with your vehicle? He said, just lock it up. 11:15 hours, vehicle secured on site of Berrima Road. Defendant conveyed to Berrima, and TLWF. And for those playing along, that means traffic light weather fine. So there we
Yep.
go. My first mock arrest was you, Schultzy.
Oh, mate, you catch up movie, yeah, sooner or later, and what do you know? I was cheeky,
Yeah,
so
very, very cheeky. So obviously, this being a training notebook, it's only used in college. So I flipped through, and at page, where's it end? It's 55, so we're getting close. 807, 9th, there we go. Our last little exercise would have been, there we go, 7th of the 9th. I've got a couple of phone numbers there, but that's the end of that. So after that, it's just a blank notebook because we don't use our training notebook in operational stuff. So from
yeah,
there, we roll straight into our first ever operational notebook. And I remember flipping into that going, what was the first thing that happened there? And I've now got like notebooks from 2007 that we roll into, and these are our first ever on the road operational notebooks that were actually the real thing. So I've got on duty 17th Night Street Patrol with ACPOs like we spoke about, Bagani, and then we're racecourse camp, and this is my first ever arrest.
Wow.
So the 19th of the 9th, 2007 was the first time I ever arrested somebody. And being in true Catherine style, it was for aggravated assault breach DVO at Bullo Community from Bullo Community. We took out what's called a Section 6A. This shows how long ago it was. A Section 6A domestic violence order taken out. I won't mention the names of the parties, but taken out between the two people. So yeah, I told you it was the Catherine two step. The very first arrest I ever make: aggravated assault, breach DVO. Oh, sorry, aggravated assault and arrested for the purpose of a domestic violence order. So
Yeah.
we took out a police issued domestic violence order. It was the old Section 6A. So
Oh,
yeah.
mate. I was just wondering, there's no way in the world you could try and count how many you've done since then, I bet.
Oh mate, it was just not just taken out, but approved and audited. And bloody hell, mate! Like we talk about Catherine busy back in those days. It was very busy, but I don't know. The systems flowed a bit better. It's sort of I don't know. We were busy. We had a lot of paperwork and all the rest of it. Domestic violence orders got so prolific in the Northern Territory that they used to be an online standard document.
Yep. Yeah,
What happened
I
was
remember.
we wrote out so many that they turned them into basically a standard hard copy document that was in triplicate to save time, just to speed us up a bit. So literally in the same format as you would write out a paper traffic ticket was how we would write out domestic violence orders, admittedly approved by senior sergeants and things like that. But yeah, they got so prolific that that's how they ended up. But it got me thinking as well. It's like these are incredible snapshots of history. Um, Not only that, they're official documents. I'm just holding it now, and I've got about 5 notebooks sitting in front of me where I'm sitting on my desk, and um, the story. Just reading through a few of the stories earlier on, it takes you straight back, which is the purpose of a notebook. Because um, I don't think a lot of people would understand. Obviously, this is long before the days of body worn camera and things like that. Like we can't review a body worn camera and then see exactly what happened. These are our
Yeah.
notes. So as a result, excuse me, we were extremely good at taking notes. Don't get me wrong, we weren't good to start with. We got it smashed into our skulls how to
Yeah.
take notes. That format that I spoke to you before, where I was talking about your mock arrest for drink driving, that I said he said format, that was applied to all kinds of things. That was a documented record of the conversation that took place on the road between yourself and offender, collecting initial evidence for whatever offence that might be. The other thing you'd write down in intricate detail, like you were telling a story literally to a judge, exactly your observations, and the more detail it was always the better. And I don't think it's understood by people outside the police force or even some people in the police force how important these documents are.
Yeah.
I'm reading through things there, and my memory flicks back because you know how we always talk about I can't remember. That's
Yep.
genuine. You go to
Yep.
so much shit that you can't. They all blend. They all blend into one. Like I remember us telling stories about things that have happened over the years, and then we go, "Oh no, hang on, that was a different job, or that was this," or because what happens is your memory just gets so full of shit that you just
Yeah.
can't remember individual things, and that's why the better notes you can take, the better it is. And this flows out from policing to the general community. If you've been involved in something where you're going to need to recollect what occurred. And it's almost a lost art. My
Mm.
grandfather, who was never a police officer, admittedly was a Commonwealth Bank manager back in the day, a long time ago. Um, he he wrote even to the day of his death. He wrote an incredibly detailed diary, and he was a pensioner. He was an old age pensioner, but he had his life diarized. Everything was written down,
Yep.
especially anything of note. So, and he used to take excellent detail. My grandmother showed me after his death, which was only a couple of months after I left and went to Duntroon in Canberra. And he wrote down in his diary, today doing this and moving this in the garden and blah, blah, blah. Of note, notified by duty, phone call at this time that Damien has departed from Brisbane Airport on flight, blah, 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 Brisbane to Canberra, Qantas flight to commence training at the Royal Military College, Duntroon. That's all written in his diary. That's how
Yeah.
that's how thorough the man was. Um, So we, as a society, we don't generally do that. Some people do, a lot of people do, but um, for police, I never did it outside of work, but at work, I was pretty good at documenting what we did.
Mm.
What are your
Yeah,
thoughts
mate.
there, mate?
Yeah, well, I mean, there was a couple of things there, like you said, and the amount of times my notes at the time have won court cases, just because you can go directly back to exactly what was said. You know, I said, they said, or he said, she said. It. I actually will tell. I'll bring up a bit of a funny one. I was getting questioned in court one day when I was giving evidence. And anyway, this defense lawyer, I can't remember exactly what the case was about, but however, they kept on touching on something. And I said, look, this is what happened. I said, if you refer to my notebook, it will be written. I'm sure, I'm positive I would have recorded in my notebook. So if you refer to my notes, it should be in there. Anyway, the joy of me and everybody else, you said your writing was neat. My writing's terrible, but I could understand it, but nobody else can,
Yeah,
except the prosecutor, which was an advantage, but no defense lawyer could actually understand. What the funny thing about it was, we obviously we won that case and all that sort of thing. And I remember watching the prosecutor; she was actually flipping through, and anyway, she put the like the notes back down. Anyway, at the end of it, she turned to me and she goes, "That wasn't written in your notebook." And I said, "Well, it bloody well should have been because
yeah,
that's what happened."
yeah, yep. Yeah, love it.
um, but look, another thing, and also, because you mentioned the civilian world, the amount of times I've given people advice to sit there, they're either going through conundrum about something. It could be a relationship, it could be being stalked, or it could be this, that, and the other. I say, look, write it down, time, date, place. Time,
Yeah,
date, place, this happened. And I said, if you create a history like that, it makes our job easier because then it's more defined. So you sit there and go, on the 5th of September at 4 p.m., this is what happened, and this is what occurred, and this is what I observed, and it was at this location.
yeah,
It makes it so, and then of course, next time it happens, you write it down. The next time it happens, you write it down. So we create a history, and that's
yeah,
also what we're doing with our notebook entries. Because I remember being explained when we were actually in the college, and they said if you are consistent with your notebooks, then even like because sometimes you question in court, oh well, you obviously you just wrote it up this time. You can sit there and go, well, go through my last 5 entries. They're written out exactly the same.
yeah,
The other joy for anybody that's actually in the police or looking at joining the police, the what is written in your notebooks is confidential.
yeah,
So basically, the one of the tricks we used to do is if we only took notes at the time, and defense would only get our notes of that time of that incident. If anybody, the other thing we used to do with the notebook is actually put a rubber band so it was only allowed to be open to the pages for that case. So
yeah. And often, if if they wanted notes from a particular incident, we'd put a piece of paper across anything else that was relevant. That
yeah,
wasn't relevant. Sorry, anything that wasn't relevant to that case was blocked out. And people would often say, "Well, what are you hiding?" It's like, "Well, hang on, none of the other stuff is any of your business.
yeah,
If anyone wants to conduct an investigation into us, they can very easily seize our notebook and read everything we've ever written. But
yeah,
the fact is that you've only got access to this job, and that's all you're getting. And there's no issue with that whatsoever. That's actually intelligent.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's how that goes. It's protecting other people involved.
Well,
Actually, I must admit. So you mentioned a very good point just then, mate. You
yeah,
said that if you create a history of taking good notes, it massively builds your credibility. And I've got an absolutely brilliant example of that.
okay,
So
yep,
in about 2011, I believe it would have been. It would have been 2010 or 2011. I was a CIB member in Catherine, and it was around the time. It was definitely around the time of the state of origin. So um, what had happened was there was a particular member or a group of people out at Maranboy Police Station, and the Mataranka member had gone out there, and the guys from what's it called? What's the community for? Anyway, it doesn't matter. Bull
Barunga,
something Bull.
Barunga,
Ah,
or Bullman,
Bullman.
yep,
Bullman. the members from
Yeah.
Bullman had come, all of the, so 3 police stations where the coppers had all met up. They told the bosses that we're going to the state of origin. We're going to go to Maranboy and watch the state of origin together. And there was no
Yep.
issue. Anyway, they had the designated drink drivers and like the drivers and the other guy would have a drink and everything. The reason they went to Maranboy is because you could have a drink at Maranboy, whereas Bullman was a dry community. So
Yeah.
they'd made an arrangement where one wouldn't drink, the other one would drink, and they'd go to Maranboy and go from there. Anyway, on the way, the Bullman members driving back from Maranboy rolled the police car heading back to Bullman for whatever reason. Um, I can't remember the exact details, but it was something like he took a corner, they lost control around a corner, and the vehicle rolled. Anyway, a particular boss just had it in his head that that's it. They were definitely drunk, and we're going to have them for it. And
Yep.
anyway, we were tasked straight away, drop everything and go and prove that this copper out there was drink driving, which, we had a lot of shit going on at the time. I was like, it's a traffic offence, sir. But anyway,
Yep.
if it is an offence at all, it's a traffic offence. So no worries, nah, not good enough. Put the detectives onto it.
Yep.
Anyway, so I mean, none of us were there. The whole thing had been reported. We were basically reviewing the entire response to this incident, and the person who took charge of the investigation was the most senior member in the whole crew, and that was the then OIC of Mataranka.
Yep.
Um, and his name's Tom Chalk. We don't have to. He's on. He's on Netflix. He's a bloody
Yeah.
absolute legend. He's an acting
He-
superintendent now.
yeah.
Anyway,
He's
Chalky was the OIC of Mataranka. He'd had a few beers and he'd stayed the night. Anyway, the next morning they'd responded and they'd done everything they needed to do. And whoever had gone out, whoever the person, I don't know I can't remember the exact details. My point is around his notes. So Chalky's notes from that particular incident, there was a bloody. This is before body worn, way before body worn camera, but I'm pretty sure they videotaped the breath test on a phone or something similar, just because they knew there'd be a witch hunt. So
Yep.
they videotaped the actual breath test and showed that he was zero at the time. They turned up to the crash scene. They breath tested him straight away. No one was hurt. Vehicle just rolled. They've got the world's best ROP system on the back, being the big steel cage. So there was no
Yep.
issue with that. Anyway, the notes were absolutely impeccable, and we had copies of his notes from the time. And anyway, we've come through, done our investigation, and gone, look, the evidence that we have at this stage, and from the statements we've taken off all the members involved, including the partners of the members who were present at the time, were that the second member, the driving member from Bullman, wasn't drinking and was deliberately. They made a point of saying, "Oh, you're not having a beer in state of origin." No, I have to drive back to Bullman in a police car. And the members from Mataranka, same thing. There was no issue, or they were staying the night. Whatever it was, everything was above board from the investigation that had taken place. Now that doesn't mean they didn't all get together and collude, but we can't prove that, and I don't think they did, because the other thing was the video footage of the breath test showed a zero reading. So anyway, they then spun it around and they've gone, "No, we want a sample of his notes. These notes are ridiculously detailed for such a job." And we did. We did a dip sample from 18 months, 3 weeks, whatever it was prior to that incident to whatever. And anyway, we opened his notebook and it was exactly the same.
Yep.
His notes were absolutely perfect. The thing was, it was the worst possible person to try and stitch up for bad notes or for doctoring notes, because his notes were perfect. He was notorious for perfect notes. I just spat
Yeah.
a lot out. That's what that was. So he was absolutely notorious for taking brilliant notes, and everyone
Yep.
knew it. I remember years before this incident going, um, just seeing his notebook. I'd worked with him plenty of times out in the bush, and we're looking at it going, mate, your notes are, and not just that, he had the writing. He just had incredibly legible writing.
Yeah.
So yeah, we did dip samples, and in the end, we just said, "Bugger this! We'll just have dip samples of all kinds of stuff, and just give us a nonchalant one where you've just done a vehicle. Like we don't need any information of crimes, but just a sample of notes where you've done a vehicle inspection or something." And he did it, and he had 2 pages worth of perfect notes about everything he observed, and his notes were absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
And it took that to prove far beyond reasonable doubt. Like, talk about innocent until proven guilty. The guys were guilty in the minds of the boss, this particular boss.
Yeah.
The fact was, And from all the evidence, I wasn't there, but from all the evidence we could gather, I'm 100% sure that the driver of that vehicle at Bullman was completely sober.
Yeah.
And all the evidence pointed that way. And not just that, they told me out of hand, they said, "Oh yeah, we got away with it." No, no one got away with it. They said that no, mate, we had a driver. We're going back to a dry community. We have to respond to jobs that night. After the state of origin, we left in it with a
Yeah.
sober driver. And yeah, his notes were just impeccable.
And mate, I'll just give a shout out to Thomas Chalk. He was I worked with him a long time out bush and even in town. He's an incredibly experienced cop and incredibly good at what he does. He was actually an inspiration to many people, I think, on how the job should be done.
Yeah,
I cannot fault him in any way whatsoever. When he was looking after Largemanu station, mate, the station was impeccable. He kept everything up to standard. Everything, the lawns were green, like whether it was outside, inside, completely clean. Yeah, like his notes, everything tidy. Yeah, done the same every time. He is an exceptional officer, and
no,
I
consummate
definitely learned a
professional.
lot.
And
Yeah,
he's the
so,
exact person you want as an acting superintendent. He'll always have your back, but I tell you what, if you step out of line, he's onto you. So
yeah,
he was all over it. He's the longest serving member at Mataranka Police Station, longest serving, I believe. He did over 10 years at Mataranka Police Station as the officer in charge.
yeah,
And Mataranka used to be a pretty, it always had its dramas, but it wasn't a terrible bush station until they brought in point of sale intervention, which is the police on the bottle shops. Which, if anyone's travelled to the NT outside of Darwin in the major centres, when you go drive through a bottle, you've got to present your ID to a police officer at
yeah,
those to just to enforce liquor and liquor laws up there. So after that started happening in Catherine, well, a lot of people were on in the Northern Territory what's called the Banned Drinkers Register, which is just an indication to how much of an impact alcohol has up there. And he all of a sudden went from running just a good little bush station on the highway, so they certainly had work to do. All of a sudden, he said, "If I had 10 blokes, it wouldn't be enough. I need
yeah,
more." My phone just rings 24/7. I can't possibly sleep. It's just insane.
yeah,
So he handled all that, and he took it in his stride, and he stayed for a number of years after that. But yeah, he was a very long-serving member at Mataranka, but his notes were just impeccable.
yeah,
But mate, going through the notebooks, just reminiscing a bit and talking about stories and reading big jobs and things like that. Um, Once you move on from when you're in general duties in uniform, you carry a notebook, it goes in your top pocket, and you write it. You're forever writing in your notebook. Every job, your notebook's out, you're taking notes. That's just how policing is,
yeah,
especially back before body worn camera. A lot of the time now, people can use body worn camera, and they've also got devices that they can be taking notes on and things like that. It's all a little bit after my time.
yeah,
But you move into the criminal investigation world and you get an A4 size diary that you're expected to maintain. And basically, it's a police issued diary. It's got all the police emblems on the front of it, and it's just a margined A4 page with lines for writing. So you've got you basically um, this will be presented in court quite a lot, especially as a detective. So you train very early on to keep a really good diary, keep it nice and neat, make sure it's well laid out and all the rest of it. And I just found a diary as well in one of my other bags. I knew I had the diaries and I couldn't see the old notebooks, but that's what we're talking about today. So we've spoken before about the Ben Hoffman shooting. So I just opened up to. I remember it happened in June. I flicked through and I find this massive day where there's not a lot of breaks. And anyway, it's got Tuesday, 4th of June, 2019 underlined, and then I've got RDO, which means I was on a rostered day off. And then it's got call out, active shooter Darwin, multiple offenders, um, 19 finesse Brett Wilson. So basically, it's straight into each job scene treated as one job. So basically, I'm taking notes from a briefing that was the first involvement for me. So I've just gone. They've got multiple offenders because we thought there were more than one shooter. There's just too many calls coming in from different locations that the information really early on was we believe we've got multiple offenders. So this is interesting stuff.
yeah,
Anyway, I've got lots of names and jobs and dates of births and things laid out, and then I've got just rattling off the team. So there's names of different of different detectives who'll be doing different things. And I think they're also present at the briefing. So, and then I've got 18 Garden Hills Crescent, which is where a man was murdered. 5 crime scenes in all, because at that point they had 5. And then I roll into my first inquiries that I'm making. So basically into who I'm speaking to and all the rest of it. I then got a note where it says recalled to comms in order to establish a better workforce. And then I've got Trident members called to assist crime scenes, all of Trident. So I made the call to my officer in charge at the time, and I called out the entire Strike Force Trident team. So it then rolls into the next days where my notes are pretty good. We got the briefing and all the members who were there. So the entire, I was then put back in charge of my crew in Trident with our taskings, and I tasked them out. But then I was called back into the office, so in the office manager role with a few others, detective sergeants. So there was about 4 of us detective sergeants in that office running through the whole thing. So the funniest part of all this, mate, is the overtime. I always wrote my overtime in red at the end of the
Yeah.
day. So I've got my off duty time, and underneath that, I always write in red pen. OT 18 hours at double time. Operation more active shooter. So then all of this time, so it flips over again, and there's just obviously just pages and pages of notes. But the end of each day is the very next day is blah 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 off duty 0200s off duty overtime 12 hours at double time blah blah. So it's just incredible overtime. But one that I thought, I don't know, I had to one time that I've taken notes. So the thing is with notes is they're observations from the time and all this sort of thing. So um, they're not just you're obviously taking what other people have said. If you've questioned somebody, especially at the GD's level, where you're talking to a drink driver or talking to a traffic offender or something, or outside of the traffic world, talking to someone, or your observations of someone disorderly outside a pub, something similar. It's just an I said, he said, and then you'd note your observations. So write down what you've seen. That's the evidence collection side of things. Once you head up into the higher echelons of sergeant, so middle management, stuff like that, the other thing that you will do is take notes about something that you disagree with when you've been involved in a high level briefing. This didn't involve any contact with a criminal or anything like that. This was me having received a briefing in relation to COVID-19. So I've mentioned it before, but my role in COVID was initially as an operations officer within the Emergency Operations Centre. The Northern Territory ran it as an incident, like you would run a cyclone or a massive flood or a bushfire or anything similar. But by this stage, so this is Wednesday, the 11th of August, 2021. So getting very close to the end of my active time in the job. And I've got on duty at land. I've written these notes, and I really remember this because I felt so against what I'd just been told that I thought I'd better document this because I am going to take this further. I disagree. This goes against everything I've ever done in the police force. So, immediately formed of overnight results regarding persons entering the NT, documents emailed from just members outlining reasons for no infringement notices issued regarding breach of Chief Health Officer directions. Incident controller, and I've named that person, stated that we will lose our jobs. I've got this in inverted commas. We will lose our jobs in the EOC for not writing tickets. Informed that the Commissioner is demanding that all people who enter the NT without pre-approval will be receiving an infringement notice, no discretion. I voiced my opposition to this, outlining that the people involved have not deliberately breached these rules and have been caught up, excuse me, in a confusing situation to no avail, infringements to be issued. Directive coming from the highest levels of government. So things like that, I'm not getting into politics. I'm not getting into all this stuff, but we have always had discretion to enforce or relax the letter of the law. That's
Yes.
how policing works. If you want to work in a world where police just enforce their regulations, then get in a get in a time machine and go back to 1939 in Germany and experience it, because you need the people on the ground with all the information and with the authority to enforce or relax the letter of the law. So this was me noting my complete and utter opposition to the fact that we were being made without discretion to enforce the law 100% at government correct. And I just was disgusted by it. If you've got people who've made an administrational error, They there's two parts of law that people talk about being actus reus. They're in they're Latin terms. They're called
Yep.
actus reus, which is guilty act, and then mens rea, which is guilty mind. You've got to prove both. You've got to prove someone had was either, and the way that the law's been written in modern times is that they've either got intention, they're reckless, they're negligent,
Yep.
or they're but that's it, isn't it?
Knowledge,
Knowledge.
intent.
They've got knowledge of the
Yep.
fact. So it's
Recklessness and
intention,
negligence.
knowledge, reckless, or
Negligence.
negligent, and they're
Yep.
the four mens rea components to prove law. Well, to me, in a situation such as the COVID-19 pandemic, where you've got chief health officer directions, which are law in the Northern Territory, especially, and everywhere else, all written the same way. The law states that any chief health officer direction is immediately a lawful order. So, therefore, under all kinds of different, under two separate parts of acts of legislation in the Northern Territory, a chief health officer direction is law. You've still got the ability to take an educational approach for people who are just completely mistaken. The situation was that the CHO directions were changing so quickly that we could barely keep our heads around it, and we were in
Yeah,
the inner
that's
circle.
right.
So the fact that they just wanted, and the thing was, these fines were not small. They were $5,000 for a person and $25,000 for a corporation. Are we just going to hit someone who's made a mistake, got off a plane, not mentioned something, not filled out a document correctly? Here's a $5,000 fine, bang. It's just no. The other thing was the second that we mentioned to them, like, this is the thing, you're going to have to return or get back on the plane and fly back to wherever you've got, whatever. They were completely compliant. It's like, too bad the breach that they've got to take it. And I went, no. And that's where I
Mm.
documented that. So I'm pretty proud of that little diary entry there. But those days were huge, mate. I'm just looking at my diary entries there, and every single day was at least an A4 page.
Yeah.
It was a huge, huge operation, extremely challenging, lots of moving parts. It was brutal.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Mate,
yeah, sorry,
you've
mate,
just
you go.
you just mentioned something really, really important there, discretion. And I know, like, even at times I'll talk about a story later on. I actually went against orders from a commander in relation to, because I knew within the public interest, and a reasonable person similarly circumstance would basically, I could justify why that I did, and then I wrote it up, and then I sent emails off basically justifying my actions, and didn't get in trouble. It doesn't mean that you disobey people, but there are certain times when you're the person on the ground, you
Mm,
have far more information at your
disposal.
in front of you than what they do. So there will be at times where you will have to sit there and make a call and be able to justify and back up exactly why you did that. And mate, you've just reiterated how important the notebook is in that time, because if that ever gets investigated or something, you get disciplined or whatever, you can actually sit there and say, I stated these are the reasons why that I
Yep.
disagree with it, with this. And mate, you're dead right, because discretion, the Northern Territory, I think, was slightly different than a lot of other states. We had far more discretion than some other states and territories, as far as I'm aware. Please, anybody else from any other state, correct me if I'm wrong, but I really liked our discretionary powers. I thought they were, especially in the common interest and all that sort of thing, we could exercise them, and I never got in trouble for basically, using my discretion. At times,
No, but
people,
like you just said, justification goes both ways.
yep,
You have to justify your discretion.
yeah,
Discretion can be read as corruption, but if you
yeah,
can justify why you've done what you've done, um, you know, the old example of a P plater, young innocent kid coming, doing 65, 66 in a 60 zone, pulls over immediately, extremely bloody apologetic and all the rest of it. Coming down there, oh, I'm so sorry, I just wasn't looking at anybody. I wasn't looking at my speed. I just, you can have an educational approach there, especially if you can tell that the message has been received that you need to change your behaviour.
yep,
Um, there's no reason to just slam them. Yep, well,
yep,
here's your fine. Go to buggery. That's counterproductive.
yep,
It's the whole
yeah,
idea. If you've got your young local hoon, that's different. Absolutely, tear the rims off it. Whatever you got
Yep,
to do. And this is discretion is used a lot in traffic. That's where primarily discretion comes into it. Our City Safe crew, our discretion was to act the way that we felt appropriate in the circumstances. It could be there's just been a fight out the front of a pub. Two unknown people to each other have had a punch up in the pub. You've questioned them both. They've obviously committed the offence against the Crown, that is fight in a public place.
yep,
And if it could even be said that one assaulted the other or whatever else, but without further pushing that, if people haven't come forward and made a complaint, there is no assault.
yep,
So it can be righto. You blokes have had a fight. A lot of the time, we'd give them a ticket anyway because we wanted to just stop that kind of stuff going on. But it could be that you know they've then pulled up and said, "Oh, I lost my head and I'm just a bit silly. I'm leaving now," and whatever else. As long as you're equal in the way you dish it out, and you're always consistent, and you're always fair, and everything you
yep,
do is reasonable, it might be that you go, right, well, you get in that taxi, you get in that taxi. We've got stuff to do. We don't want to see your face again. And that's the end of that. And
yep,
that's discretion. However
yep,
you see fit at dealing with a situation in the best interest of the community is the way you deal with it. Will we show discretion for a domestic violence offender? No. Our
mm,
discretion would be that you're going to jail, my boy. So,
yeah,
oh my God, because it happens to both. So
yep,
it's obviously these things ramp up, and yeah, but for those minor offences especially, discretion's really important. And the thing is, the justification goes both ways. If you use force against somebody, you would document the force that you used in a notebook. You would write down the reasons that you did certain things. He did this. I felt that this was going to affect this person. Therefore, I did this. You make sure it's all noted. Write it
yep,
out, and it feels weird when you first start. I know that senior police would be sitting there going, "Yeah, of course," but junior police don't get it. You think just writing down the things that you need to remember. And, oh, I'll remember that. It's like, mate, you won't. In 2 years, you won't.
exactly. Yeah,
So you write it out, write it all out.
when somebody makes a complaint, which sometimes happens 6 months later, you won't remember it. Because
Ah,
you've done 500 arrests since then,
yeah,
especially in these busy locations. And one thing I always taught my junior officers was the fact that our action, whatever action we take, as long as we stop that behavior, that is our role, is to actually stop the continuation of the offense and prevent them, or stop them from doing it again. Of course, you're not a mind reader, you don't have a crystal ball, but if you are satisfied by the action that you've taken, whether that's a caution, whether it's a ticket, whether it's arresting them, that they are not going to continue that behavior, then you've done your job.
yep. No,
um,
exactly right.
Yep. So, and I reiterated that to a lot of my junior officers because I mean, that basically that's what I believed. And also, I will just there's a lot of lines, and I use it a lot as a prosecutor because I mean, they're very important. A reasonable person similarly circumstanced, and the actions would what is it, within the community that you belong, would be
Yeah, the
reasonable.
standards of the community to which you belong.
Yes,
Yep.
yes. So, and that's always a good test. So, whatever you do, if you think about those two things and you can justify within the community that you're in, then usually you're heading down the right track.
Yeah.
Um, it is what I would say.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, well, mate, that's yeah, the old notebooks. They're really interesting to go through, and especially now being out for a few years, just to find these old gems and just flick through every now and then, have a smile to myself about certain things I've done, and yeah,
A trip down memory lane.
little trip down memory lane. And then it's funny, actually, I'll end with a bit of a funny one, that this is the first operational notebook that I had. And anyway, it had me, where are we? This one. It had me at Manu, and I'm a few pages in. And I noticed flicking through this notebook that I'm leaving gaps between things, and that's a huge no-no. And I'm
Yeah,
thinking, oh, geez, leaving leaving a few gaps there. That's not like me. But early on, I mean, it was. And then I come to notebook inspected by OIC. Here we are. Notebook inspected by OIC Lajamanu, acting OIC Richard McGree, who's now a substantive superintendent. spoken to, all in order, however, spoken to regarding leaving blank spaces in the notebook with the big OIC large amount stamp in the middle of it and the time and a date. And then I flick the pages and there's not a gap to be seen. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's little things like that. Is that, yeah, the whole idea with legal documents is you'll never leave a gap. So even
No.
where it might be easier to read something if you do leave gaps, we always fill every single line. And
Yep.
then, looking at my CIB diaries, there's not a single line. It's just a blur of writing.
Yep.
So yeah, no, it's good old notebooks. Yeah, they're a hell of a thing, and still to this day, even with all the technology we have, when all else fails, you still got a pen and a notebook.
Exactly. Yep. Yep. And like they are so important. Like I said, made to save my ass a couple of times, or yeah, and got convictions, and rightly so because you wrote your notes at the time. Um,
Yeah,
it's probably one of your best tools at being a police officer.
yep, definitely,
So,
absolutely.
but anyway, mate, that might just about wrap us up, I think.
That'll wrap us up, mate.
Yep. So, yep. Yeah. So, there's actually a couple of other things I reckon we could actually talk on after that, and that's we could probably go a bit more into discretion and or some of the jobs that we went through, but that'd be for another episode. But for anybody listening, please keep on getting in contact with us. I do apologise again for the email. We'll get that fixed up. I'll actually call Stu tomorrow and get that sorted. So I do apologise for not replying straight away. And yeah, but otherwise, get in contact through our socials and like our page. Yeah, we're getting more and more listeners all the time. So thanks to all of those listening. And Damo, you got anything to say before we go, mate?
Nah, that'll do us. Nah,
Oh,
all good. We
oh,
appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
will do. See ya.